The wipers barely kept up as torrential rain battered the windshield, each droplet exploding like tiny shards of glass against the glass. Marisa Holden tightened her grip on the steering wheel until her knuckles gleamed pale in the reflected light. Her chest heaved with short, uneven breaths as a fresh contraction clawed through her belly. "Not now, please, not now," she whispered hoarsely to the empty car, her voice drowned beneath the storm's roar. The old Jeep rattled and coughed as she forced it around another curve of the narrow mountain road. She had been driving for hours, fleeing Denver, fleeing judgmental neighbors, fleeing silence that pressed down on her like a coffin lid. 25 years old, 7 months pregnant, and abandoned. She had traded everything for this unborn child, friends, her family support, even her own fragile sense of belonging. Her daughter kicked, sharp and insistent against her ribs, as if sensing her turmoil. Marisa laid a trembling hand across her swollen stomach. At least she wasn't utterly alone. The GPS had died long ago. She was heading by memory, chasing the ghost of her grandmother's cabin hidden somewhere in the Rockies. The storm, however, had twisted familiar roads into a labyrinth of blackness. Lightning tore across the sky, lighting the dense forest like a photograph burned into the air. In that moment, Marisa's heart clenched. A figure stood in the center of the road. She slammed the brakes. Tires screamed against the rain-slicked asphalt, the Jeep fishtailing before colliding with a guardrail. Metal groaned. The hood hissed, steam rising. For a moment, she sat frozen, heart pounding. Empty roads stretched before her. No figure. Just the pounding rain. Her mind, frayed by exhaustion and fear, must have conjured the shape. But then he stepped from the tree-line. He moved like something born of the storm, tall and broad-shouldered, dark hair plastered against his skull, clothes clinging to a frame carved of predatory strength. Yet it wasn't his form that rooted her breath, it was his face. He was impossibly handsome, with sharp features touched by an ageless cruelty and beauty. Cheekbones like sculpted stone, a mouth firm but not unkind, and eyes that burned an otherworldly crimson amber. They shimmered, not quite human, not quite wolf, and something more. A hybrid. She didn't know how she knew, only that some primal part of her screamed recognition. Marisa fumbled for her phone. Dead. No signal. He reached her door, tapping against the fogged glass. She hesitated, instincts warring. Run. Stay. Her gaze locked with his. The storm seemed to dim around them. You're hurt. His voice was deep, resonant, touched with an accent she couldn't place. Old, like it carried centuries in its tone. Another contraction tore through her. She doubled over with a cry. His expression changed instantly, sharp caution replaced by something fierce, protective. You're in labor, he said, and there was no question in his tone. Marisa gasped, clutching the steering wheel until her nails dug into the leather. No, it's too early, she panted, her breath clouding the glass. I just need to keep going. You won't make it in this storm, he interrupted, his voice rough but calm. His crimson amber eyes flicked to the smoking hood, then back to her pale, sweat-slicked face. Your car is finished. And so are you if you stay. Lightning tore open the sky again, and for the briefest second she thought his silhouette shimmered, as if the rain bent around him, unwilling to touch him. Her instincts screamed danger. He wasn't ordinary. He wasn't even human. But another contraction ripped through her, fiercer this time, and all she could manage was a desperate whimper. He crouched beside her window, close enough that she could see droplets racing down his face. They did not bead like rain on skin, they vanished as though absorbed. His presence radiated unnatural heat despite the icy storm. Marisa cracked the window, cold wind and water instantly whipping in. Who are you? She managed, voice barely audible. For a moment, his expression shifted, unreadable, as though the question carried more weight than she could comprehend. At last, he answered. Lucien Vainar. The name struck something deep in her chest, unfamiliar yet familiar. Like hearing an echo of a dream she couldn't recall. Her lips formed it silently, testing its shape. Lucien. Another contraction struck. She groaned, gripping her stomach, unable to hide the tears brimming in her eyes. Lucien's face softened, some dark mask falling away. "You can't stay here," he said firmly. "Come with me. My shelter isn't far. You and the child will be safe." Safe. The word rang like a bell, offering hope where logic screamed only danger. Her hand hovered over the door handle. "I don't even know you." A flash of something pain? Longing? Rippled across his features. His voice lowered, rougher now, carrying something old, primal. "You don't have to know me, Marisa Holden." Her heart stumbled in her chest. She had not told him her name. Fear surged, but so did something else. A strange pull, a gravity she could neither explain nor resist. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and for a terrifying, breathtaking moment, she could have sworn she saw fangs when he spoke again. "Come. Now. Before it's too late." The guardrail beneath her jeep groaned under the storm's battering wind. With a final shriek, the metal shifted. The jeep lurched sideways. Marisa screamed as Lucien wrenched the door open with impossible strength, pulling her into his arms as the vehicle slid and crumpled against the cliffside. She clung to him instinctively, her body trembling against his. His skin was burning hot, almost feverish, yet she felt steadier in his grasp than she had in months. "Hold on to me," Lucien said, his mouth near her ear. His voice was a promise wrapped in command, and somehow she obeyed without hesitation. As the storm raged, he carried her off the ruined road and into the trees, moving with an unnatural grace. Branches whipped and cracked around them, but none touched her. It was as though the forest itself bent aside for him. Marisa buried her face against his chest, torn between terror and a bone-deep sense of inevitability. She didn't know who or what this man was. But as her unborn child stirred and her body writhed with contractions, one truth burned brighter than fear. This stranger was her only chance. Marisa tried to count the seconds between contractions, but the rhythm blurred beneath the thunder. Lucien moved as though the storm were nothing, his boots barely sinking into the mud, his steps swift and unerring. The forest pressed around them, a wall of black pine and skeletal branches whipping in the wind. And yet, it was silent where he walked. The storm howled all around, but within the circle of his presence, there was a pocket of eerie calm. How are you doing this?" she gasped, clutching at his soaked shirt. Her hand felt the unyielding muscle beneath, but no heartbeat. Lucien's jaw tightened. Not now. Not now. But his avoidance told her more than words. Another contraction struck, pulling a ragged cry from her throat. He stopped instantly, lowering her just enough to steady her on her feet. His hand, large, warm, calloused, pressed against her lower back. "Breathe," he commanded softly. His eyes glowed faintly crimson in the dark, steady and grounding. "In. Out. Let the pain pass through you." She obeyed without thinking, the authority in his voice undeniable. Strangely, it helped. The contraction eased, leaving her trembling, but still standing. Lucien studied her face for a moment, unreadable. Then, with a careful gentleness that contrasted his predatory strength, he lifted her into his arms again. "We're close." They broke through the tree lean into a clearing. There, nestled against a ridge, stood a cabin that seemed pulled from another time. Its stone walls gleamed wet beneath the storm, smoke curling defiantly from a chimney. Warm light glowed from the windows, a beacon in the darkness. Marisa's breath caught. "It's real." Lucien carried her to the door and pushed it open without hesitation. Inside, heat enveloped her instantly, the air heavy with the scent of cedar, old parchment, and something darker, metallic. The cabin was both rustic and impossibly elegant. Stone hearth blazing, shelves crammed with leather-bound books, tapestries hung with symbols she didn't recognize. Candles burned despite the electric lamps, their flames steady as though sheltered by invisible hands. He set her gently on a wide leather couch near the fire. She sank into its warmth, clutching her belly as another wave of pain rolled through her. Lucien crouched in front of her, his amber-crimson eyes fixed intently on her face. "You'll be safe here." Safe. The word again. But this time, it wasn't reassurance, it was a vow. Marisa searched his features. The firelight only made him more otherworldly. The sharp cheekbones, the full mouth, the eyes that seemed to hold centuries. Beautiful. Dangerous. Impossible. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered, voice trembling. His gaze darkened, his expression unreadable. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy. Then, softly, with the weight of inevitability. "Because you're not here by chance, Marisa." His hand brushed against hers, heat searing her skin. Fate doesn't make mistakes. Before she could ask what he meant, another contraction ripped through her body. She cried out, clutching at him instinctively. Lucien caught her hands in his strength steadying her as if the storm inside her body could be born through him. And as she leaned on him, half in pain, half in terror, she realized something impossible. The more she touched him, the less the agony consumed her. The fire crackled, throwing shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Marisa sat forward, gripping her knees, forcing air into her lungs as the contraction finally eased. Sweat trickled down her temple despite the cool storm air seeping through the stone walls. Lucien moved with quiet precision around the cabin. He closed the shutters, checked the locks, and stoked the fire higher, as though sealing the world out. His presence was steady, but his movements were too fluid, almost predatory. Marisa's eyes followed him warily. She couldn't ignore what she had felt when he carried her. The unnatural calm around him in the storm. The heat of his body with no heartbeat. And those eyes, glowing faintly even now, reflecting the fire like molten jewels. He turned back toward her, and she quickly looked down at her belly, as if that could hide her staring. "How far apart?" he asked, his voice deep, steady. She blinked. "The contractions?" He nodded once. 10 minutes. Maybe less. Her hand pressed instinctively against her stomach. "It's too early. I'm not supposed to." "Babies come when they choose," he interrupted softly. His tone carried the weight of experience. Too much experience for someone who looked barely older than 30. Marisa studied him carefully, suspicion gnawing at her. "Are you a doctor?" A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, humorless, almost self-mocking. "Not a doctor. But I've helped bring new life into the world before." That answer did nothing to ease the unease curling in her stomach. She swallowed, trying to keep her voice steady. "Lucien, what are you?" His gaze locked onto hers. The firelight painted his face in sharp relief, shadows clinging to the hollows of his cheeks, his eyes glowing faintly brighter, his lips parting just enough to reveal the glint of elongated canines. Marisa froze. He looked away quickly, rising to fetch a blanket, but she'd seen it. Her pulse pounded in her ears. "You're not," she couldn't finish the sentence. Lucien draped the blanket across her shoulders, careful not to meet her gaze. "Rest. You'll need your strength." But her fear broke free. "You don't even breathe, do you?" Her voice cracked. "I carried you, Marisa," he said quietly, finally looking at her again. "Out of the storm. Away from the edge of death. If I meant you harm, you would already be gone." The words sank into her, undeniable. She wanted to recoil, to put distance between them. Yet something in his voice, not plea, not threat, but truth, rooted her in place. Still, her instincts fought. "Why me? Why now? How do you know my name?" Lucien's jaw clenched, his eyes flickering between crimson and amber, as if two forces warred inside him. "Because," he said finally, his voice low and rough, "I've dreamed of you for years." The room fell silent but for the fire. Marisa's skin prickled. She should have felt only fear. Yet against all reason, a shiver of recognition coiled deep inside her. Marisa's chest tightened, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and terror. "Dreamed of me?" The words echoed in her mind, absurd and impossible, and yet they struck something familiar, like the edges of a memory she couldn't quite grasp. "You're lying," she whispered, though her voice trembled with uncertainty. Lucien's expression didn't change. He stood in the fire's glow, tall and immovable, the storm's fury muffled by the thick cabin walls. "You think so?" Her heart hammered, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "People don't dream of strangers. Not like that. Not, like you said." His eyes darkened, flickering between that eerie crimson and molten amber. It wasn't a trick of light, it was real, unnatural, terrifying, and mesmerizing all at once. "I'm not just people," Lucien said quietly. The words should have chilled her. Instead, they landed like a truth she'd been circling without admitting. "Then what are you?" she demanded. Her voice was stronger now, though her body quivered with the effort. He exhaled slowly, and this time she heard it, a sound not quite breath, more like wind pulled through hollow stone. He moved closer, crouching in front of her again, so close she could see the faint lines of veins beneath his skin. His beauty was sharper up close, dangerous, too flawless to be human. "I was born of two bloodlines that should never have touched," he said, his voice low, heavy with the weight of confession. "A vampire father. A werewolf mother." Marisa's stomach lurched, though not from contractions this time. She stared at him, wide-eyed. "That's not possible." He gave a mirthless smile, bearing the faint glint of fangs again. "I assure you, my existence is proof enough. My mother died bringing me into this world. My father tried to burn the blood out of me, but I survived. Half predator of the night, half beast of the moon." She wanted to scoff, to call him insane. But the storm outside, the impossible strength with which he'd carried her, the glow of his eyes, it all fit, in a terrible way. "And you expect me to believe this?" "No," Lucien said. His gaze softened, though the intensity never left his face. "I expect you to feel it." Before she could respond, he reached out slowly, giving her every chance to recoil, and placed his hand lightly on hers where it rested on her belly. The reaction was immediate. Heat surged through her body, a strange, electric warmth that sank into her bones. Her unborn daughter stirred, not in distress, but in recognition. Marisa gasped, her free hand flying to her chest. "What was that?" "The blood in her veins knows mine," Lucien murmured, his crimson amber gaze fixed on her with something like awe. "As yours does." "You are not here by accident, Marisa. I found you because I was meant to." She shook her head, trembling. No, this is insane." "Is it?" He pressed gently. "Tell me you haven't felt it. The pull. The dreams. The sense you were never as alone as you thought." Her lips parted, but no denial came. She had dreamed. Of glowing eyes. Of a voice calling her name. She'd woken sweating, her heart racing, convinced she was haunted. Now, staring at him, she realized the voice had been his. Marisa pulled the blanket tighter around herself, as though the thick wool could shield her from the storm of truths crashing down on her. Lucien's words churned in her mind, impossible yet undeniable. "I don't want to believe you," she whispered, her voice raw. But she trailed off, unable to finish. Lucien tilted his head, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. The firelight reflected in his eyes, making them glow as though lit from within. "But your heart already does," he said softly. "Even if your mind fights it." She shook her head fiercely, though tears welled unbidden. "No, I've already been fooled once." At that, Lucien's expression shifted, a shadow crossing his face. "The father?" he asked carefully. Her chest ached, the familiar wound reopening at his words. "I don't even know his name," she admitted bitterly. "He told me it was Gabriel. Said all the right things, looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. 3 nights later, he was gone. His phone disconnected, the address on his card fake. My parents, they said I was a fool. They cut me off." Her voice cracked, the confession spilling like a dam breaking. "And now here I am. Alone. 7 months pregnant with a child who deserves more than this. More than me." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the fire's snap. Then, slowly, Lucien knelt beside her. He didn't speak at first. He just reached up and brushed away the tears on her cheek with a callous thumb. His touch was surprisingly gentle, warm where she had expected cold. "You are not weak," he said, his voice low but fierce. "You carried life alone when the world turned its back. That is strength most cannot fathom." Marisa wanted to argue, but the conviction in his tone cut through her self-doubt like a blade. "And the child," he added, his gaze flickering briefly to her stomach, "she is more than you realize. Her heart skipped. What do you mean? Lucien's jaw tightened, as though he weighed the danger of his answer. Blood remembers. And when bloodlines cross that were never meant to, it creates something new. Marisa stared at him, pulse quickening. New. Stronger, he said simply. Your daughter may carry the instincts of a wolf, the resilience of humanity, and his voice faltered, and his eyes darkened to a near-black crimson. The hunger of a vampire. The room tilted around her, fear spiking hot in her veins. No. Lucien caught her trembling hands in his grip unyielding but steady. Not a curse, he murmured urgently. Not what you think. She is possibility, Marisa. She is proof the world does not have to remain divided. Marisa's lips trembled as she searched his eyes. She expected hunger or cold detachment. Instead, she found something she hadn't seen in anyone for months. Hope. The next contraction came like a wave breaking against stone. Marisa cried out, her body folding in on itself as fire lanced through her belly. Lucien was beside her in an instant, steadying her shoulders, his heat enveloping her. Breathe with me, he commanded, his voice a low resonance that seemed to settle her pulse. In. Out. Focus on me. She obeyed, clinging to his gaze, and again, like before, the pain dulled, became bearable. It wasn't gone, but it felt as though some of it flowed into him, siphoned away through the grip of his hand around hers. Her eyes widened. You're doing it again. Lucien's lips pressed into a thin line. The bond is awakening faster than I expected. What bond? She gasped, sweat beading at her temple. His gaze flicked briefly to her stomach, then back to her face. Between us. Between all three of us. You, the child, and me. Marisa's heart pounded. That's not possible. His eyes softened, molten amber shimmering through the crimson. And yet you feel it. Before she could answer, a sound outside split the silence. Not thunder. A howl. Long low. Haunting. Marisa stiffened, her hand flying to her belly. What was that? Lucien rose in a blur of movement too fast for human eyes, crossing to the shuttered window. His posture changed, taller, rigid, every line of his body thrumming with tension. His nostrils flared, as though scenting the storm. That, he said darkly, is why I told you we had little time. Another howl answered the first, closer now, circling the clearing. Then another, sharper, layered with something more than animal rage and tension. Her stomach twisted with dread. Wolves. Not just wolves. His voice carried a dangerous edge now, each word deliberate. A pack. Marisa's pulse quickened, terror surging. They can't know about me. About the baby. Lucien turned, and the firelight revealed something feral in his face. His eyes burned brighter, his jaw clenched, fangs pressing visibly against his lower lip. They know, he said simply. And they've come to judge. The words sank like ice into her bones. Marisa gripped the edge of the couch, her nails digging into the leather as fear eclipsed even the pain of her contractions. Judge, she whispered, her voice nearly swallowed by the storm. Lucien's gaze locked with hers. The crimson in his eyes deepened, threaded with molten gold. You are human. You carry a child whose blood is not entirely mortal. To the pack, that is a threat. Her breath hitched. A threat? She's not even born yet. They don't care, he said sharply. Then, softer, the steel in his voice folding into something else. But I care. Another howl split the night, closer, so close she could almost feel it vibrate through the cabin walls. The sound prickled along her spine, an instinctive terror she didn't understand. Lucien moved to a tall cabinet set against the wall, unlocking it with a twist of his hand. The hinges groaned as he pulled it open, revealing weapons that gleamed in the firelight: blades, rifles, crossbows. But none looked ordinary. Silver glinted on steel. Strange runes etched along the wooden stocks pulsed faintly with power. Marisa's stomach nodded. You're preparing to fight them. I am preparing, Lucien corrected grimly, pulling a long knife from its sheath. The silver along its edge shimmered as if alive. But fighting is not my goal. I am Alpha. My word is law. Her head snapped up, shock rippling through her. Alpha. Lucien turned back to her, his presence filling the room with something more than physical strength. Command. Authority. Power that thrummed in the air like a second heartbeat. Yes, he said simply. I lead them. Or I did. His lips twisted, a flicker of bitterness crossing his face. My blood makes me different. Some question my right to rule. And now, with you here, he broke off, his jaw tightening. Marisa's fear sharpened into something else. Anger. So they'll punish me? My baby? Just because we don't fit their rules. His eyes burned brighter at her words, his teeth flashing briefly in a snarl. No one touches you. Or her. He crossed the room in 2 strides, crouching in front of her again, his hand gripping hers with fierce certainty. Do you hear me, Marisa? They'll have to go through me. And none of them are strong enough. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from the heat in his words. His vow felt absolute, unshakable. Another contraction hit, ripping through her body. She cried out, clinging to his hand. Lucien held fast, his eyes glowing fiercely. They'll come to the door, he murmured. They'll demand to see you. To see her. His thumb traced across her knuckles, almost tender despite the tension humming through his frame. But remember this, Marisa. Whatever they say, whatever they threaten, my protection is law. And I will spill blood before I let them harm you. As her cry of pain faded, Marisa looked into those impossible eyes, half fire, half night, and realized something that chilled and warmed her all at once. This was no stranger. This was no chance meeting. Somehow, she had walked straight into the arms of the storm. And now, there was no turning back. The pounding on the cabin door was deliberate, heavy, and far too human to be mistaken for the storm. Marisa jumped, clutching her belly, instinctively pulling the blanket around herself as if it could hide her and the child within. Lucien rose in one smooth motion, his entire frame hardening. His shoulders squared, his stance widening, the alpha presence rolling off him in a tangible wave that made even Marisa's breath catch. He looked less like a man now, more like a force of nature. Lucien. A voice bellowed from outside, rough and commanding. Male, strong, with the resonance of someone used to being obeyed. You've brought a human onto sacred ground. Open the door. Marisa's blood ran cold. She gripped the arm of the couch, her knuckles white. They know, she whispered. Lucien's eyes flicked toward her, molten amber bleeding through the crimson glow. Stay here, he ordered, his tone brooking no argument. No matter what you hear. Her heart pounded. Lucien. I mean it, Marisa. His gaze locked with hers, fierce and unyielding. Your safety, and hers, he nodded at her belly, is the only law I recognize tonight. The pounding came again, harder this time. The door rattled on its hinges. Lucien strode across the room, each step controlled, deadly. He flung the door open in one sharp motion. The storm howled through the threshold, whipping rain and pine needles into the cabin. Figures stood on the porch, 5 of them, their eyes glowing faintly in the night. They were human in shape, but Marisa felt her skin crawl at the raw power radiating off them. Wolves in human skin. One stepped forward. A tall, broad-shouldered man with iron-gray hair and eyes like ice. His voice cut through the storm. You violated the law, Lucien. Lucien stood unmoving, framed by firelight and storm. His expression was cold, regal, terrifyingly calm. She is under my protection. Murmurs rippled through the pack behind the gray-haired man. The words seemed to carry more weight than Marisa understood. The man's eyes narrowed. She is human. She carries tainted blood. The child is mine to guard, Lucien snapped, his voice vibrating with an authority that made the walls tremble. Marisa gasped, her hand flying to her chest. His words burned into her, even as fear coiled tighter. The gray-haired man bared his teeth. You would defy your pack for her? Lucien stepped forward, shoulders squared, fangs glinting in the firelight. His voice rang with undeniable finality. I would defy the world. The storm seemed to hold its breath. The porch creaked under the weight of the gathered wolves. Their eyes glimmered faintly in the dark amber, silver, even pale blue, like a constellation of predators. Marisa's breath quickened. She couldn't see their faces clearly from the couch, but she felt their presence pressing against the cabin walls, heavy and suffocating. The gray-haired wolf, clearly their spokesman, lifted his chin. You risk everything, Lucien. Our secrecy. Our future. That child is an abomination. The words sliced through Marisa like a blade. Her hands flew instinctively to her belly. Lucien's growl was immediate, low and resonant, vibrating through the floorboards. Say that again. The man did not flinch. You were born of broken blood yourself. Half vampire. Half wolf. You know what it is to be cursed. Do not burden us with another mistake. Behind him, a younger voice rang out, sharp, eager. Kill it now. End the threat before it grows. Marisa gasped, choking back a cry. Her vision blurred with terror. They weren't just judging her. They were condemning her daughter before she even drew breath. Lucien's voice thundered across them, laced with both wolf's dominance and vampire's menace. Anyone who touches her answers to me. The porch fell into uneasy silence. Lightning split the sky, illuminating Lucien's figure half shadow, half fire, fangs glinting, eyes ablaze in molten crimson gold. The gray-haired wolf's expression shifted. Not fear. Calculation. You claim Alpha's right, he said slowly. Then prove it. If this child lives, the pack must see her with their own eyes. We must decide together. Marisa's pulse spiked. She shook her head violently from her seat, whispering to herself, no, 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 they can't. Lucien didn't turn. His focus never wavered from his pack. You'll see nothing. Not tonight. She rests under my roof until the birth is done. A ripple of dissent broke among the wolves. The young voice snarled again. That is not your choice alone. Lucien's power surged, filling the clearing. Even from across the room, Marisa felt it, like standing too close to a lightning strike. His voice cut like steel. I am Alpha. The words struck with force, silencing the storm itself for one impossible heartbeat. The wolves shifted uneasily, some lowering their gazes, others baring their teeth in quiet defiance. From the couch, Marisa clutched her belly, heart hammering, tears slipping down her cheeks. She had thought she was running from judgmental neighbors, from whispers and side-eyes. She had not known she was running straight into a world where her daughter's life would hang on the word of wolves. And tonight, her only shield was a hybrid alpha who looked ready to tear his own kind apart. The storm pressed in, its howls echoing with the tension on the porch. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the gray-haired wolf, clearly their elder, lifted a hand, silencing the younger voices behind him. His gaze bored into Lucien's. You buy them one night. No more. His tone was sharp, clipped, as if each word was carved from stone. When the child comes, we decide her fate together. If she is a danger, if she carries too much of the vampire's curse. She won't, Lucien growled, stepping forward until the threshold crackled with invisible force, power radiating from him like heat from a forge. The elder's lips peeled back in something between a grimace and a smile. You can't know that. None of us can. But if she is what I fear, then not even you, Alpha, will shield her. Behind him, the younger wolves bristled, eager, their hunger for violence palpable. Marisa felt bile rise in her throat. They were talking about her baby like she was some kind of weapon, something to be tested and discarded. Her contraction came so suddenly she doubled over with a sharp cry. Lucien's head whipped around instantly, his expression softening even as fury still burned in his eyes. She's in labor, he snapped at the wolves, his voice ringing with command. Go. For once, the elder didn't argue. He lifted his hand again, and the pack shifted reluctantly back into the storm. But as they turned, Marisa heard their words carried on the wind. By dawn, we will have answers. And then, more chilling still, from the younger one, if the child is a monster, she dies. And the mother with her. Marisa clapped her hand over her mouth, choking back a sob. The door slammed shut, Lucien locking it with a force that rattled the frame. He leaned his head against the wood, breathing hard, though not from exhaustion. It was fury barely contained. When he turned back, his face was hard, his fangs still visible. But when he looked at Marisa, the anger melted into something else entirely. "I won't let them touch you," he swore, crossing the room in 3 strides and kneeling at her side. He pressed his warm hand against her damp hair, his gaze locking with hers. "Do you hear me? Whatever comes at dawn, they'll go through me first." Marissa's throat worked, words tangled in fear and gratitude. "But Lucien," her voice trembled. "What if they're right? What if my baby is different?" His thumb brushed away a tear, his expression fierce. "Then she is different. And she will be protected all the same." His words settled into her chest like iron and fire. For the first time since she'd found herself stranded on that road, Marisa believed it might be true. But outside, she could still feel them. The pack lingered in the storm, waiting, circling. And dawn was coming. The cabin was hushed, but for the crackling fire and the storm's muted roar. Outside, the pack lingered like shadows at the edge of the clearing, waiting. Watching. Inside, time blurred for Marisa into waves of pain. The contractions grew stronger, closer, each one ringing a cry from her lips despite her efforts to stay quiet. Sweat plastered her hair to her temples. She clutched the blanket to her chest, gasping, "It's too soon. She's not supposed to come yet." Lucien crouched beside her, his hand firm against her back, his presence grounding. "She comes when she chooses," he said softly, the words carrying both command and comfort. "You're stronger than you believe." Marisa wanted to scream at him, to tell him he didn't understand. But each time the pain hit, his voice, his eyes, glowing softly in the firelight, pulled her back from the edge. At one point, as another contraction ripped through her, Lucien grasped her trembling hand in both of his. His eyes darkened, and for a moment the air around them shifted, thickening, humming with a strange power. Marisa's pain dulled. Not gone, but less sharp, less unbearable. She blinked at him in shock, breathless. What did you do?" Lucien shook his head, sweat glistening at his temples though his body never tired. "It doesn't matter. Only that you endure." But it did matter. Because when she closed her eyes, she felt it, something flowing between them. A tether. His strength bleeding into her, her pain sinking into him. She knew it wasn't natural, and yet she didn't recoil. For the first time, she didn't feel utterly alone. Hours passed in a haze of pain, whispered reassurances, and Lucien's steady presence. Every so often, he rose to the window, watching the storm-slick forest. His shoulders tensed each time, his jaw flexing, but he never told her what he saw. At last, as the fire dimmed to embers, another contraction hit so hard Marisa nearly doubled over. She cried out, clutching her belly, and something inside her shifted, not just pain, but pressure. Urgency. Lucien knelt instantly, his hands steady on her arms. "It's time." Marisa's heart thundered. No, she can't." "Yes." His eyes gleamed, crimson and gold burning brighter than the dying fire. "She's ready. And so are you." Marisa shook her head, sobs breaking free. "I can't." "You can," he said, his voice a growl of conviction. "You will. And I will not leave your side." Another contraction slammed into her, forcing a scream from her throat. The storm outside seemed to answer with a crack of thunder, rattling the cabin walls. And as she clung to Lucien's hands, another truth burned through the fear. Her daughter wasn't waiting anymore. The cabin seemed to shrink around them, the shadows pressing in with every shuddering contraction. Marisa's cries rose and fell with the storm outside, her body racked with pain so consuming she thought it might break her. Lucien never left her side. His hands anchored her shoulders, his voice cut through the haze like a lifeline. "Breathe. That's it. Again. You're stronger than this pain." She sobbed, shaking her head. "I can't." "You can." His eyes blazed, molten gold threaded with crimson. "You've carried her this far. One more push. For her. For her." The words struck deep. Marisa clung to them, gathering what little strength remained. She bore down with a scream, the sound torn from her throat like the storm itself. Minutes stretched into eternity. Sweat soaked her skin, her hair, the blanket she gripped so tightly it nearly tore. Each contraction felt endless, but Lucien's presence was constant, heat, strength, unyielding will pressed into her trembling body. At last, a final push racked her, stealing the last of her breath, then release. A sharp, thin cry pierced the air, fragile yet fierce. Marisa sagged back against the couch cushions, sobs breaking free as tears blurred her vision. She's here, Lucien finished, his voice hushed with awe. He cradled the newborn in his arms, his massive frame suddenly softened, reverent. The storm raged outside, but inside, there was only the small, wriggling miracle in his hands. The baby's skin glistened with life, her tiny fists clenched, her cry high and strong. But as Lucien shifted her gently into Marisa's arms, Marisa froze. The child's eyes, barely open, cloudy with newness, flickered. Not blue, not gray, not the muted tones of most infants. For an instant, they shimmered with amber light. Marisa's heart stumbled in her chest. Did you see? Lucien's expression darkened, but not with fear. With recognition. I saw. The baby quieted almost instantly in Marisa's arms, nuzzling against her mother's chest, as though soothed by some unseen tether. Marisa held her close, overwhelmed by a rush of love so fierce it drowned out everything else, the pain, the fear, the wolves circling in the storm. But Lucien's gaze lingered on the child, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, reverent, and edged with something darker. She is more than either of us imagined. Marisa swallowed hard, kissing her daughter's damp hair. She's just my baby. Lucien's eyes flicked to the window, where distant howls rose once more, closer this time, impatient. His voice dropped into a growl. Not to them. The fire had burned low, casting only a dull glow across the cabin. Outside, the storm had thinned to a steady drizzle, the thunder rumbling like a warning far off in the mountains. The night was fading, and with it, Marisa's fragile sense of safety. She rocked her daughter against her chest, the tiny body warm, the faintest hum of life pressing into her. Each small breath, each tiny sound, filled Marisa with an ache of love she hadn't known she was capable of. But beneath the joy lay unease. Because she had seen it, her daughter's eyes flashing amber. Wolves' eyes. Lucien stood at the window, his silhouette rigid. He had been watching since the moment the child was born, his broad shoulders tense, his gaze fixed on the treeline. She could feel his attention split, half with them, half with the shadows outside. You haven't sat down once, Marisa murmured hoarsely, breaking the silence. Lucien's voice was low, steady. I can't. Because of them, she pressed, nodding toward the storm-streaked glass. His jaw flexed, though he didn't turn. Because they're waiting for dawn. Waiting to see what she is. His gaze flicked, just briefly, toward the sleeping child in Marisa's arms. And, because they already think they know. Marisa's throat tightened. You heard them. They'll kill her. Finally, Lucien turned. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim firelight, twin embers of crimson and gold. Not while I breathe. The words should have comforted her, but they carried a weight that frightened her even more. She studied him. The way his features seemed carved from stone, the restless tension in his hands, the sharp edge of fangs glinting when his lips pulled tight. You mean that, she whispered. I do. His gaze softened, though the feral fire beneath it never dimmed. Marisa, I know what it is to be called cursed. To be judged for the blood you carry before you've drawn your first breath. He took a step closer, his voice low, vibrating with truth. I won't let them decide her worth. Or yours. Her chest ached, caught between fear and something dangerously like trust. The baby stirred, whimpering softly. Marisa rocked her gently, murmuring nonsense words, but when she looked down, her breath caught. The child's tiny eyes opened, glimmering again, unmistakably. Amber light flickered in their depths. And this time, Marisa saw something else, the faintest shimmer of crimson, as though Lucien's blood burned in her too. Lucien, she whispered, heart pounding. Look. He crouched beside her, his expression unreadable as he studied the child. Fear. pride, and something older, darker, that Marisa could not name. She carries both, he murmured. Wolf and vampire. Stronger than either. Marisa clutched her daughter tighter, shaking her head. She's just a baby. Lucien's gaze met hers, intense and unyielding. Not to them. And not to fate. Outside, a howl rose, clear and sharp, breaking the thinning night. Others joined it, surrounding the cabin. The pack had grown restless. And dawn was only minutes away. The first pale light of dawn bled across the storm-thin sky, painting the cabin walls with faint silver. Marisa sat rigid on the couch, her daughter nestled against her breast, while every nerve in her body screamed at her to run, though there was nowhere to go. The howls had ceased. That silence was worse. Lucien stood at the door, his posture coiled with tension, as though he could feel their approach through the earth itself. His eyes shimmered faintly, half crimson, half amber, shifting with every flicker of the fire. A sharp knock rattled the wood, followed by the gray-haired wolf's voice. Calm, deliberate, merciless. Lucien, the night has passed. You know the law. Show us the child. Marissa's arms tightened instinctively around her daughter. No, she whispered, shaking her head furiously. They'll kill her. Lucien turned, his gaze locking onto hers. The alpha presence poured from him like heat from the fire, steady and commanding. Look at me, Marisa. Her chest heaved, panic fighting her lungs. No, I can't. Look at me. Her eyes lifted to his. For a moment, the storm within her stilled. His voice dropped, low and certain, a growl wrapped in velvet. I will not let them take her. But if we hide her, they will assume the worst. Wolves fear what they cannot see. A second knock, harder this time. The voices outside murmured, impatient. Marissa's lips trembled. What if they see her eyes? Lucien stepped closer, kneeling before her. His large hand brushed against her cheek, anchoring her. Then they will see the truth. That she is mine. That she is strong. That she belongs. Belongs. The word cut deep. For so long, Marisa had belonged nowhere. Now, her daughter's place in this world hung by a thread. A third knock thundered against the cabin door, followed by the elder's command. Now, Lucien. Or we come in. The baby stirred, a faint whimper escaping her lips, her tiny fist curling against Marissa's chest. Lucien rose, his frame filling the room with his presence. His voice rumbled, calm but edged with power. We will show her. On my terms. He strode to the door and unlatched it. The hinges groaned as dawn light spilled inside, outlining his imposing form. The pack stood beyond 8 wolves in human skin, their eyes glowing in the pale morning. Lucien's voice carried across the clearing, steady as stone. You will see her. But you will not touch. Behind him, Marisa clutched her baby tighter, heart hammering, as the world outside held its breath. The clearing was drenched in pale light, every droplet of rain clinging to the trees glittering like cold fire. The pack stood in a semicircle, their postures taut, their glowing eyes fixed on the open door. Lucien stepped out first, shoulders squared, the alpha's presence rolling off him in heavy waves. The wolves shifted subtly, some lowering their gazes, others baring their teeth in quiet defiance. Behind him, Marisa rose on shaking legs. Her body still ached from the labor, her mind screamed at her to protect her newborn, but something stronger than fear moved her forward. She cradled her daughter close and followed Lucien onto the threshold. A hush fell across the clearing. The elder with gray hair stepped forward, his icy gaze sweeping over Marisa before landing on the bundle in her arms. Show us, he demanded. Marisa clutched the child tighter. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Lucien's hand settled lightly at her back, his warmth steadying her. Only when she is ready, he said evenly. Not a second before. The elder's jaw tightened. Do not play games, hybrid. The pack has the right to know what blood has been brought into this world. Before Lucien could answer, the child stirred. A soft whimper escaped her lips, followed by a faint cry. Marisa lowered her gaze, rocking her daughter gently, and then gasped. The baby's eyes fluttered open. They gleamed in the morning light, not the cloudy gray of a newborn, but unmistakable, amber-ringed with crimson, glowing faintly like embers beneath glass. The pack reacted instantly. Growls rippled through their ranks, sharp whispers flaring. Abomination. Cursed. She carries both. Marisa's heart lurched. She held her daughter tighter, her voice breaking. She's not cursed. She's just a baby. The elder's gaze was sharp as a blade. She carries the hunger of the vampire and the wild of the wolf. That is no innocent child. Lucien moved like thunder. He stepped between Marisa and the pack, his stance wide, his presence towering. His voice thundered across the clearing, "She is mine." The words cut through the pack's murmurs like steel. Even the elder faltered, his eyes narrowing. Lucien's gaze swept over them all, his voice resonant, commanding. "You see a threat. I see the future. She is under my protection, by blood and by bond. Any who challenge her, challenge me." The pack shifted uneasily. Some bowed their heads, the alpha's authority binding them. Others bristled, defiance simmering. But for Marisa, the moment carved itself into her soul. As Lucien stood before them, fierce and unyielding, she realized he wasn't just protecting her daughter. He was claiming her. Both of them. The elder's icy gaze lingered on Lucien, unflinching even beneath the alpha's power. The murmurs among the pack stilled as he finally spoke, his words heavy with authority. "You protect her with fire and fury, Lucien. But protection is not proof. The pack cannot accept a creature of two cursed bloods without trial." Marisa stiffened. "Trial," she whispered, clutching her daughter so tightly the baby stirred with a soft, protesting cry. Lucien's snarl rumbled low in his chest, his fangs glinting faintly in the dawn. "She is not cursed." The elder's eyes sharpened. "Then let her prove it. Let the child endure the rite of blood when the time comes. If she survives, she will be recognized. If not—" "No," Lucien's voice cracked like thunder, silencing the forest itself. "She will not be paraded like some offering to your fear. She lives. That is all the proof you need." But the wolves shifted restlessly, their glowing eyes flashing. The younger ones, those who had muttered abomination in the night, bared their teeth. "The right is law," one spat. "Even an alpha cannot ignore it." Marisa's stomach dropped. Her knees trembled beneath her, her body still too raw, too fragile. "You're talking about putting her in danger," she said hoarsely. "She's a newborn. She hasn't even lived a full day, how could you?" The elder cut her off with a cold glance. "If she is what you claim, human, she will endure. If not, better her life end swiftly than doom us all." Marisa's vision blurred with tears. She wanted to scream, to throw herself at them, to claw their eyes out with her bare hands. But before she could speak, Lucien stepped forward, his presence radiating such force that the wolves instinctively drew back. His eyes blazed crimson and gold burning hotter than fire. "Enough. She is mine. My mate's. My blood's. Do you dare strip her from me?" The word, mate, hit Marisa like a physical blow. Her breath caught, her pulse stumbling. But she barely had time to process it because the elder had not retreated. Instead, the gray-haired wolf tilted his head, calculating. "Then claim her fully. Claim them both. Prove to us the bond is true. If your mate stands at your side, if your child bears your strength, the pack will accept them." Marisa's knees weakened further. Mate. Bond. Trial. It was too much, too fast. Lucien didn't flinch. His gaze swept the pack like a blade, then returned to her. The fire in his eyes softened, but his words came as a vow. "I already have." The clearing seemed to shrink around her. The wolves stood in tense silence, eyes glowing faintly in the dawn, their hunger and suspicion thick in the air. But Marisa could barely process them. Her heart hammered too loudly in her ears, drowning everything out except Lucien's words. "Mate." She clutched her daughter tighter, her lips trembling. "What did you just say?" Lucien turned toward her, his features carved with determination, yet softened in a way she had never seen. His crimson-amber gaze caught hers, burning with a heat that made her knees weak. "You are mine, Marisa. Not by choice, not by chance. By fate. She shook her head violently. No. No, that's insane. We just met. Did we? His voice was low, velvety, and dangerous. Or have you felt me before? In dreams. In the moments you thought you were alone. The pull in your chest you couldn't explain. Her throat closed. Because she had. Nights where she'd woken gasping, heart racing, haunted by eyes glowing in the dark. A voice whispering her name. She had dismissed them as nightmares. Now she wasn't so sure. This bond is older than either of us, Lucien continued, his words carrying the weight of prophecy. Wolf and vampire blood are cursed to solitude. But hybrids are different. I was never meant to walk alone. And neither were you. Marisa's breath shook. You can't just decide I belong to you. I don't decide, Lucien growled softly. Fate does. He stepped closer, his presence wrapping around her like the storm, like fire, like something too vast to fight. That's why your child stirs when I touch her. That's why your pain weakens when I take your hand. We are already bound. A ripple of unease went through the pack, their voices rising in hushed growls. The elder lifted a hand, silencing them, his icy gaze sharp. Then prove it. Let us see the bond. Marisa's pulse spiked. What does that mean? Lucien's gaze flicked briefly to her lips, then back to her eyes. It means letting them feel what we already know. That you are mine. That I am yours. Her breath caught, heat flushing through her despite the cold morning air. The wolves were watching, waiting, judging. Lucien extended his hand, palm up, his voice low but certain. Trust me, Marisa. Just this once. And you'll see I'm not wrong. Her body trembled. Fear screamed at her to run, to deny him. But something deeper, something primal, inevitable, pulled at her bones, whispering that he spoke the truth. Slowly, with her daughter nestled in one arm, Marisa reached out and placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, the world shifted. Heat surged through her veins, not painful, not frightening, but vast. A tether snapped taut between them, pulling her heart to his strength pouring into her breath caught in his chest. The pack staggered, some gasping, some snarling, as if the force of it rippled outward. Lucien's eyes blazed, crimson and amber burning like twin suns. His voice thundered across the clearing. She is mine. They both are. And Marisa, trembling, heart racing, knew she could no longer deny it. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the steady drizzle of rain dripping from the trees. The bond's energy still hummed in the clearing, a living thing that seemed to vibrate through the air, settling into the soil beneath their feet. The wolves shifted uneasily, some lowering their gazes as though unable to meet Lucien's eyes. Others bared their teeth, their resistance curdling into defiance. The elder, however, stood unmoving. His icy eyes lingered on their joined hands, on Marisa clutching the newborn against her chest, and for the first time his expression faltered, just slightly. So it is true, he murmured, more to himself than the others. The bond exists. A ripple went through the pack, half awe, half unrest. One of the younger wolves spat onto the wet earth. A cursed bond. Between a human and a hybrid. It should not exist at all. Lucien's growl rolled like thunder. And yet it does. He stepped forward, still holding Marisa's hand, his towering presence forcing the younger wolf to back away despite his words. Deny it all you like. Fate does not bow to your fear. The elder raised his hand again, silencing the pack. His eyes narrowed on Lucien. The bond may be undeniable. But the child remains a question. Bonds can be manipulated. But blood tells the truth. Marisa clutched her daughter closer, her voice breaking. She's just a baby. You can't keep talking about her like she's some weapon. The elder's gaze flicked to her, sharp as a blade. You carry her, human. But you do not know what you've brought into this world. If she cannot control what burns in her veins, she will destroy more than herself. She will doom us all. Lucien stepped between them, his voice cutting like steel. Then she will learn. With me to guide her. The elder's lips pressed thin, but he didn't deny the claim. Instead, he spoke slowly, heavily. Very well. She lives for now. But when the time comes, she will face the rite of blood. If she fails, not even your bond will shield her." The younger wolves growled their approval, eager at the thought. Others looked away, uneasy but unwilling to challenge the elder's decree. Marisa's knees threatened to buckle. "Rite of blood," she whispered, her voice trembling. Lucien's hand tightened around hers. His jaw was hard, his gaze unflinching. "It won't come to that," he said, though the storm in his eyes betrayed the fury and fear twisting inside him. The elder turned, signaling the pack to withdraw. As they melted back into the trees, their eyes lingered on the cabin, on Marisa, on the newborn in her arms. And when the clearing finally emptied, silence swallowing the space again, Marisa looked up at Lucien with tears streaking her face. "They're never going to let us live in peace, are they?" Lucien's hand rose to cup her cheek, his eyes burning with a vow as old as blood. "Then we won't live in peace. We'll live in defiance. Together." The cabin door closed with a heavy thud, shutting out the clearing, the wolves, and the last echoes of their threats. Marisa leaned against it, her knees trembling, her daughter stirring softly in her arms. Every muscle in her body ached from birth, fear, and exhaustion, but her mind spun too fast to let her rest. Lucien crossed the room, his strides measured but tense, and stoked the fire until it roared again. The sudden light chased the shadows back, but not the weight of the words still clinging to the air. Marisa sank into the couch, her daughter cradled close. She brushed a finger across the baby's tiny cheek, whispering, "She's just a child. How can they talk about her like she's some kind of trial to be passed?" Lucien's shoulders stiffened. He remained standing, staring into the flames as though they held the answers he didn't want to give. "Lucien," Marisa pressed, her voice trembling. "What is the rite of blood?" He didn't turn. For a long time, the only sound was the fire crackling. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, gravel-edged. "It is the oldest law of the pack. When a child is born under suspicion, when their blood is deemed too dangerous, they are tested. Fire, silver, hunger. If they endure, they are accepted. If they fail..." His silence finished the sentence. Marisa's arms tightened around her daughter protectively, as though sheer will could shield her from such cruelty. "She's a baby. How could you ever allow?" "I won't." His head whipped toward her now, his eyes burning crimson gold, his jaw set hard. "Do you hear me, Marisa? I will never allow it. If they try, I will tear down every law, every wolf, every elder who dares stand against her." His fury filled the room like a storm, vibrating in the walls, searing in the air. Marisa's breath caught, both fear and something deeper tugging at her chest. But beneath her fear, questions clawed. "What if they're right?" she whispered. Her gaze fell to her daughter's faintly glowing eyes. "What if she can't control it? What if she is dangerous?" Lucien moved to her in an instant, kneeling in front of the couch, his hands braced on either side of her legs. His face was close, too close, his eyes blazing with fire and conviction. "Then I will teach her. She will learn balance, because I will give her balance. She will learn control, because I will bleed for her to have it." His voice lowered, fierce, but gentle. "No child is born a monster, Marisa. It is the world that tries to make them one. And I will not let the world touch her." Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and relentless. She looked down at her baby, who had quieted, tiny breaths puffing against her skin. So small. So fragile. And yet already marked. Marisa lifted her eyes back to Lucien. "And what about me?" she whispered. For the first time, his expression softened, the fire in his gaze dimming into something warmer, more human. His hand brushed a damp lock of hair from her cheek. "You are not mine because of her. You are mine because fate has bound you to me." The bond only revealed what was already true. Her heart thudded, caught between terror and the dangerous pull of his words. And as his hand lingered against her face, Marisa realized the truth she had been running from since the moment he pulled her from the wreckage. She was already his. The firelight bathed the cabin in soft gold, chasing away the sharp edges of dawn that crept through the shutters. Marisa sat curled on the couch, her daughter nestled safely against her chest, the baby's tiny breaths a rhythm that steadied her frayed nerves. Lucien remained crouched in front of her, though the storm in his body had quieted. His hand still lingered near hers, as if touching her anchored him. She studied him in the flicker of light, finally able to take him in without the chaos outside pressing in. For all his beauty, the sharp lines of his face, the strength in his frame, there was something in him that felt carved from grief. "Tell me," she whispered. "Tell me why you fight so hard for her. For us. You said you know what it's like to be judged, cursed. What happened to you?" Lucien's gaze flickered away, toward the fire. The flames reflected in his crimson-amber eyes, as though they, too, carried his memories. "My mother," he began slowly, his voice rough with restraint, "was a wolf. Loyal, fierce, too brave for her own good. She fell in love with someone she should not have. A vampire lord. Older than nations, crueler than the dark he claimed to rule." Marisa's throat tightened. "Your father?" Lucien nodded once, his jaw taut. To him, she was a possession. A fascination. But to her, he was salvation she thought she could tame. His lips curled in a humorless smile. "Wolves are foolish that way. They believe in bonds, even where none exist." Marisa's heart ached at the bitter edge in his words. "When she conceived me," Lucien continued, "the pack called her traitor. The coven called her cursed. And when I was born," his voice dropped lower, darker, "she died. My father tried to burn the wolf from my blood. The pack tried to drown the vampire. Neither succeeded." Marisa's eyes blurred with tears. "So they hated you for surviving." His gaze returned to hers, molten with quiet fury. "They feared me. A thing that should not exist. I learned to wear their fear like armor. But it does not make the nights less long. Or the silence less loud." Her chest tightened painfully. She knew that loneliness. Different, but the same. The kind that crept into your bones, whispering that you didn't belong anywhere. Lucien reached out then, almost hesitantly, his fingers brushing the back of her hand. "That is why your daughter matters, Marisa. She is not a curse. She is not a mistake. She is proof that what they fear can endure. That what they call impossible can live." Marisa swallowed hard, her tears slipping freely now. She looked down at her sleeping baby, then back at him. "And me?" she asked softly. "What am I proof of?" Lucien's eyes softened, fire dimming into something warmer. He leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "That even a creature made of hunger and fury can find someone worth protecting." The words stole her breath. For the first time since this nightmare began, the terror that ruled her heart loosened its grip. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she had believed. The cabin was quieter now. The storm had passed, leaving only the soft patter of water dripping from the eaves and the occasional groan of the old timbers. The fire burned low, its glow wrapping the room in warmth. Marisa leaned back against the couch cushions, her daughter nestled against her heart, finally sleeping. For the first time in what felt like forever, the weight of her body sank into rest. But her mind refused to still. Her eyes found Lucien, who sat nearby, one arm draped over his knee, watching both her and the flames with equal intensity. She thought of his words, mate, bond, fate, and the way the air had seemed to crackle when their hands touched. "What exactly is this bond?" she whispered, her voice hushed so as not to wake the child. "You talk about it like it was written before we were born." Lucien's gaze slid to hers, steady and unflinching. "Because it was." Her pulse quickened. "That doesn't make sense." He leaned forward, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "The wolf blood in me is bound by the moon's will. The vampire blood by shadow's hunger. Both crave connection, but in different ways. For most, those urges war with each other. But when one soul calls to another," he paused, searching her face. "There is no war. Only recognition. Only inevitability." Her stomach fluttered uneasily. "Recognition? You mean, you've just decided I'm yours?" His lips curved in a faint, humorless smile. "Not decided. Known. The same way you know to breathe, even when you're drowning. The same way your body knew to bring life into this world, even when your mind screamed you couldn't survive it." Marisa looked down at her daughter, who stirred softly in her sleep, a faint glow pulsing in her tiny amber-crimson eyes before fading again. Something in her chest tightened. But I didn't. I didn't feel it, not until. Until you were ready to, Lucien finished for her. The bond is not always welcome. It is not always kind. But once it awakens, it cannot be undone. His words terrified her, yet a part of her. The part that remembered the way her pain had dulled beneath his hand, the way her heart had leapt when he'd touched her, knew he was right. She swallowed hard. And if I don't want it? His gaze softened, though his jaw remained tight. Then I endure the ache. But the bond remains. Whether you claim me or not, I will still feel you. I will still protect you. Marisa's heart stumbled. The idea of someone bound so fiercely to her was as suffocating as it was intoxicating. She had spent so long being abandoned, cast aside. And now here was this impossible creature, declaring he would never leave, even if she tried to push him away. Before she could answer, Lucien's head turned sharply toward the window. His body went still, every muscle coiled. Marisa's breath caught. What is it? His eyes flared crimson. They're still out there. Watching. The warmth in the cabin fractured, replaced by the cold certainty that the night's trial was only the beginning. Marisa's arms tightened instinctively around her daughter. The baby stirred at the tension in her body, letting out a soft whimper before settling again. Still out there, she whispered, her voice raw with fear. Lucien's gaze didn't leave the shuttered window. His body was a statue of stillness, but his eyes glowed faintly, scanning something beyond sight. The pack does not retreat so easily. They're waiting. Watching. Measuring me. Her throat tightened. Measuring you? For what? He turned then, his expression hard, but laced with something darker. For weakness. For hesitation. For any sign that I cannot protect what I've claimed. The words sent a chill through her veins. She wanted to ask what would happen if they decided he couldn't, but she already knew. Marisa rocked her daughter slowly, trying to soothe both the child and herself. So, what do we do? Lucien moved closer, crouching in front of her. The firelight etched his features in harsh relief, making him look both devastatingly human and utterly inhuman. We endure. For now. His voice was quiet, steady. But understand this, Marisa, wolves are not the only ones who will feel her arrival. Her head snapped up. What do you mean? Lucien's jaw tightened, his eyes burning with a crimson flare. Blood carries power. The moment she was born, her cry carried into the night like a beacon. Any who hunt for strength, for prophecy, for change, they will feel her. Marisa's stomach dropped. Others? Like who? He hesitated, and she realized whatever answer he carried was not one he wanted to give. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, reluctant. The covens. The old ones who crave purity of blood. And the hunters, who see anything different as a threat to be purged. Her heart pounded, every word sinking like stones. So it's not just the wolves who want to take her from me. Lucien reached for her hand, his touch warm, grounding. It is not just the wolves who will try. His gaze hardened, the alpha fire surging through him. But I am not theirs to command. Nor hers. Nor yours. If the covens come, I will meet them. If hunters find us, I will bury them. Whatever comes, they will not take you. Marisa wanted to believe him. Needed to. But fear clawed at her chest. You can't fight the world, Lucien. His lips curved into a grim smile, his fangs flashing faintly in the firelight. Then let the world come. I've been fighting it since the day I was born. She stared at him, torn between awe and terror. Her daughter shifted again, her tiny eyes flickering faintly with amber-crimson light as though answering his vow. And for the first time, Marisa wondered if fate hadn't just bound her to Lucien, if it had bound them all to something far larger. Something the world was already stirring to face. The baby's small breaths filled the cabin, fragile but steady. Marisa stroked her daughter's cheek with trembling fingers, desperate to anchor herself in something pure, something untouched by the weight of Lucien's words. But his gaze lingered on the child, molten with fire and shadow, and Marisa knew he was not finished. What does she represent, Lucien? She asked quietly. Why are they all so afraid of her? He hesitated. For once, his voice lacked its usual iron certainty. Because she is what they never wanted to exist. Marisa's throat tightened. You mean, like you? His jaw flexed, but he nodded. Yes, but more. I am one born of accident, of rebellion. She is born of bond. His eyes flicked to Marisa, softening with something deeper. She carries both halves not in war, but in harmony. She may be the first to truly hold balance. Marisa stared down at her baby, her lips trembling. Balance? She's just a child. She's not meant to carry something that heavy. Lucien leaned closer, his voice low, reverent. You don't understand. The wolves believe the moon guides their fate. The vampires, that shadow and hunger shape theirs. But if one child proves both can exist as one, his eyes burn brighter, dangerous with conviction. It could change everything. Her stomach twisted. Change everything, or destroy everything. A humorless smile tugged at his lips. Exactly. Which is why the pack demands the right. Why the covens will hunt her. Why hunters will burn villages to find her. Marisa's arms tightened protectively around her daughter, her heart pounding with terror. And you expect me to raise her in the middle of all that? Lucien's hand brushed hers, firm but gentle. No. I expect us to raise her in defiance of it. Marisa met his gaze, caught in its intensity. She wanted to argue, to scream, to demand the quiet, ordinary life her child deserved. But somewhere in her chest, beneath the fear, a spark flickered. Hope. Before she could speak, Lucien's head turned sharply toward the shuttered window. His nostrils flared, his eyes darkening. Marisa's stomach dropped. What is it? His voice was a growl, low and cold. Not wolves. The cabin seemed to still. Even the baby's breathing felt too loud. Lucien rose slowly, his body shifting into readiness, every muscle coiled. Something else has scented her. A chill slid down Marisa's spine. The covens. He shook his head once, his eyes narrowing. No. Older. Darker. Something that should not have crossed this mountain. Outside, the wind moaned, carrying with it a faint, almost human sound. Not a howl. Not a cry. A whisper, drawn long, as though the storm itself had learned to speak. Marisa clutched her daughter tighter, terror rooting her in place. Lucien. He turned back to her, his eyes burning like twin embers, his fangs flashing in the firelight. Stay inside. No matter what you hear. And then he opened the door. The door swung open, and a wave of damp morning air swept into the cabin. Mist rolled across the clearing, thick and unnatural, swallowing the last traces of dawn light. Marisa shivered, clutching her daughter tighter against her chest. Lucien stepped onto the porch, his broad frame cutting a dark silhouette against the fog. The bond between them tugged at her chest like a rope, pulling her heart after him, warning her not to let him go. Lucien, she whispered hoarsely, but he didn't look back. His attention was fixed on the tree-lean. Shapes moved in the mist. Not wolves, the air lacked the musky, earthen scent of fur. Not vampires either. There was no metallic tang, no taste of blood in the air. This was something else. Something wrong. A whisper carried across the clearing, thin and drawn out, echoing in ways no voice should. The child. Marisa's stomach dropped. She rocked back on the couch, clutching the baby as her heart pounded against her ribs. No, she breathed, they can't. Lucien's growl rumbled low and deep, vibrating the porch boards. Show yourself. The mist swirled. And then, as though the fog itself condensed, a figure emerged. Tall. Lithe. Cloaked in tattered gray, its face hidden beneath a hood. Its movements were smooth, flowing, like smoke given form. And though it walked as if human, its shadow stretched too long, curling across the ground like black water. Marisa's throat tightened. Her instincts screamed at her to run, though her legs wouldn't move. Lucien, she called again, her voice breaking. What is it? His eyes glowed brighter, crimson burning against the fog. Not pack. Not coven. Something older. He bared his fangs, his voice a deadly growl. A wraith. The figure stopped at the edge of the clearing. The mist curled tighter around it, like a living cloak. And when it spoke again, its voice was not one sound but many, male, female, young, old, layered, and distorted. The child does not belong to you, Alpha. She belongs to the veil. Marisa's body went cold. She clutched her daughter so tightly the baby stirred, letting out a thin cry. No, she whispered fiercely, rocking her. You can't have her. Lucien stepped forward, his presence swelling until it filled the clearing. His voice was thunder, rolling with alpha command and vampire menace. She belongs to me. To her mother. To no one else. The wraith tilted its hooded head. For a moment, silence hung, broken only by the hiss of mist against the earth. Then its voice spread again, weaving through the trees. We will come when the moon bleeds. And then we will take what is owed. Before Lucien could move, the figure dissolved into the mist, vanishing as though it had never been there. The clearing fell silent. Lucien stood unmoving, his jaw clenched, his chest rising and falling with sharp restraint. Only his eyes betrayed him, glowing brighter, burning with a fury that made the air itself hum. Marisa's voice cracked through the silence, raw with terror. Lucien, what did it mean? He turned at last, his eyes meeting hers. And for the first time, she saw not just strength, but a flicker of fear in him. It means the wolves are not our only enemy. Lucien shut the door with a sharp motion, the wood rattling in its frame. The fire had nearly burned down, but the cabin felt colder than before, as if the wraith had left its shadow inside with them. Marisa sat stiff on the couch, her baby bundled in her arms, rocking instinctively. Her voice trembled. What was that thing? What did it mean about the veil? Lucien paced across the cabin, every muscle in his frame taut, his eyes glowing faintly crimson. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice low and grim. The veil is older than wolves. Older than vampires. Older than the mountains themselves. Marisa's blood chilled. What is it? He turned toward her, his expression carved from stone. It is the barrier between this world and the one beneath it. A place where spirits linger, where hunger never dies. The wraiths serve it. They are its fingers, reaching through to drag the living across. Marisa clutched her daughter tighter, her heart hammering. And they want her. Lucien crouched before her, his hand brushing against the baby's small head, careful, reverent. They want what she represents. A child born of balance. Wolf and vampire, human and spirit. Her blood is a doorway. To them, she is not a child at all. She is an opening. Marisa's stomach twisted, ball rising in her throat. You mean they'll keep coming for her? Yes. His eyes burned hotter, his voice deepening with the weight of his vow. But they will not have her. Not while I live. Her tears spilled freely now. She shook her head, clutching her daughter as though sheer will could hide her from fate. She's just a baby. Why can't anyone see that? Lucien's hand rose to cup Marisa's cheek, his warmth steadying her even as his eyes gleamed with fury. Because the world does not see innocence, Marisa. It sees power. And it fears it. Marisa's heart ached, breaking under the weight of it all. Then how do we keep her safe? Lucien's joy tightened. He rose to his full height, shoulders squared like a man preparing for war. We keep moving. We stay ahead of the pack. Ahead of the covens. Ahead of the wraiths. Marisa's stomach clenched. Always running? His gaze softened as it returned to her. Always fighting. But not alone. Their eyes held, the bond tugging between them like an invisible thread. She wanted to believe him, to lean into his strength, but fear whispered that it would never be enough. As if sensing her thoughts, the baby stirred. For a heartbeat, her tiny eyes opened, amber rimmed with crimson, glowing faintly even in the dim cabin light. Lucien's expression shifted, awe and determination mingling in his gaze. He whispered more to himself than to Marisa. She will not just survive this. She will change it. Lucien moved to the far wall of the cabin and pressed his palm against a rough-hewn timber. The wood groaned, then shifted, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside gleamed steel, silver, and bone, an arsenal that seemed pulled from both ancient battlefields and nightmares. Marisa gasped softly. My God. Lucien's hand brushed over the weapons with practiced familiarity. A silver-edged axe. Blades etched with runes that shimmered faintly in the firelight. Wooden stakes bound with iron. Even vials of dark liquid that glowed faintly, pulsing as if alive. He pulled a dagger free and set it on the table, its silver blade inscribed with symbols that made Marisa's skin prickle just looking at them. The pack can be fought with tooth and claw, the covens with steel and fire. But the wraiths, his eyes darkened. They require more. Marisa clutched her daughter closer, shaking her head. You can't fight shadows. A grim smile curved his lips. Can't I? He drew a small pouch from the compartment and poured its contents into his hand. Ash-gray powder glimmered faintly like starlight. Salt from holy ground. Bone dust from the first alpha. These are wards, Marisa. They won't stop the veil, but they will slow its reach. He moved through the cabin with quick precision, sprinkling the powder along windowsills, door frames, even the hearth. As he worked, the air seemed to thicken, humming faintly as if invisible strings had been pulled taut. Marisa watched him, torn between awe and terror. How long have you been preparing for this? Lucien's back stiffened, though he didn't turn. All my life. Her breath caught. You knew something like this would happen? I knew, he said softly, setting the pouch down, that my existence meant nothing good would come quietly. I've been hunted since the day I drew breath. And I knew one day, fate would send me the reason why. His eyes flicked to her, crimson and amber glowing softly. Now I know who I was preparing for. Heat surged to Marisa's cheeks, her chest tight. She wanted to protest, to reject the inevitability in his words, but the bond between them hummed like a living thread, and she couldn't deny the pull. Still, fear twisted inside her. She looked down at her daughter, who slept soundly in her arms despite the tension in the air. But what if it's not enough? What if all of this, she gestured at the weapons, the wards, the walls, can't stop them? Lucien crossed the room in 2 strides, crouching in front of her. His hand brushed hers, grounding her. Then I'll burn the world down before I let them touch her. Before I let them touch you. The vow in his voice was so fierce, so absolute, it stole her breath. But deep in her chest, a whisper of dread remained. Because no matter how strong Lucien was, no matter how many wards he placed or weapons he wielded, the world was already coming for them. For a time, silence held the cabin. The wards Lucien spread gave the air a subtle hum, a low vibration Marisa could feel in her bones. The fire burned steady, casting the room in warm gold, but the weight of everything pressed down heavier than the storm ever had. She shifted on the couch, adjusting her daughter in her arms. The baby stirred briefly, letting out a soft squeak before settling again. Marisa kissed her tiny forehead, tears stinging her eyes. She deserves better than this, she whispered. A world where people don't talk about her like she's cursed. A world where she can just be a child. Lucien, seated at the table now with a blade in hand, paused in his sharpening. His crimson amber gaze lifted, catching hers. She will have that world. Marisa let out a brittle laugh. How? Surrounded by wolves who want to test her, covens who want to use her, wraiths who want to drag her into some veil. Her voice broke. You can't fight all of it, Lucien. Not forever. His expression softened, though determination still burned like steel in his eyes. Then I'll carve out a place where she can exist. Where you both can. Even if I have to tear down the old laws and salt the earth they stood on. The certainty in his voice made her chest ache. That sounds like a war. His lips curved in a faint, humorless smile. It probably will be. Marisa rocked her baby gently, her thoughts spiraling. And what then? She grows up always running? Always fighting? She looked back at him, her eyes brimming. What kind of childhood is that? Lucien set the blade down and rose, crossing to her in a few measured steps. He crouched before her, his hand brushing hers, grounding her. The kind where she survives, he said firmly. And survival, Marisa, is the root of freedom. Once she survives, she can choose what kind of life she wants. But first, she has to live long enough to claim it. Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to scream that survival wasn't enough, but her gaze dropped to her daughter's tiny glowing eyes as they fluttered open. Amber laced with crimson, shimmering like a promise and a warning both. And she knew he was right. Still, the ache in her chest didn't ease. I don't want her to be a weapon in anyone's war. Not theirs. Not yours. Just mine. Just my little girl. Lucien's hand cupped her cheek, warm and steady. She will be yours first. Always. But she will be more, whether we want it or not. That is what fate has written. Marisa leaned into his touch, her tears spilling. Then I'll fight fate itself if I have to. A rare softness touched Lucien's lips, almost a smile. Then you are more wolf than you think. Their eyes held, the bond between them humming stronger than ever. And in that moment, though fear still clung to her, Marisa felt something shift. She was no longer just a frightened woman who had lost her way in the storm. She was a mother. And she would not break. The cabin had settled into a fragile calm. The baby slept in Marisa's arms, her tiny chest rising and falling, the faintest glow still lingering in her eyes when her dream shifted. Lucien lingered near the table, sharpening another blade, his movements precise, methodical. But then he froze. Marisa felt it instantly through the bond, a ripple of tension, the air thickening as if the cabin itself braced. Her breath caught. Lucien? His head lifted toward the window, his nostrils flaring. The faint hum of the wards shivered, like a harp string plucked by unseen fingers. They're back. Her stomach dropped. The wraiths. No, his voice was low, edged like the blades in his hands. The pack. A knock followed almost instantly, heavy and deliberate against the door. Not frantic like a threat. Not subtle like a thief. This was the knock of wolves who knew their presence could not be ignored. Lucien's eyes burned faintly as he moved toward the door. Stay with her, he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Marisa clutched her daughter tighter. Lucien, what if? But he was already opening the door. The gray-haired elder stood on the porch, the dawn light catching the silver in his hair. Several wolves flanked him, their glowing eyes fixed coldly on the cabin. Their postures were stiff, restrained, but Marisa could feel the hostility radiating from them like heat. Alpha, the elder said, his tone clipped, formal. We return with terms. Lucien leaned against the frame, arms folded, radiating casual menace. Speak. The elder's gaze flicked past him, settling briefly on Marisa through the crack of the door. His lips pressed thin. The child lives for now. But the right cannot be avoided. When the moon next bleeds, she will face it. If she survives, she is pack. If she fails, she dies. Marisa gasped, her arms tightening around her baby. No. Lucien's growl rattled the doorframe. I already told you. The elder raised a hand, silencing his outburst. This is not debate, Lucien. The pack whispers of you already. Some bow to you. Others plot against you. Without the right, they will not follow you. You will not hold them. And if you cannot hold them, they will tear her from you themselves. Silence pressed heavy in the clearing. Lucien's jaw tightened, his body trembling with the effort to contain his fury. Finally, his voice came low, seething. And if I refuse? The elder's eyes were cold as stone. Then you lead no pack. And you will stand alone when the covens and the wraiths come. Marisa's heart lurched. Alone. Against all of it? Even Lucien could not fight that. The elder turned, signaling the others. You have until the bleeding moon, hybrid. Choose wisely. And then they were gone, fading into the trees, leaving only the echo of their threat behind. Lucien shut the door slowly, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles gleamed white. For the first time, Marisa saw something in him she hadn't before. Not fury. Not certainty. Doubt. The door thudded shut, and the cabin felt smaller for it, every breath weighted, every heartbeat echoing too loud. Marisa clutched her daughter against her chest, rocking her instinctively, as though the rhythm could protect her from words that lingered like knives. She lifted her gaze to Lucien. His shoulders were rigid, his fists trembling where he still gripped the wood. What is it? She whispered, her throat tight. What do they mean, the right? Lucien didn't answer. Not right away. He leaned his forehead against the door, the glow of his eyes dimming like embers beneath ash. "Lucien," she pressed, her voice breaking. "Tell me, please." He turned at last, his gaze molten with fire and anguish. He crossed the room in 2 long strides and knelt before her, his presence overwhelming, his hands braced on either side of her knees. "It is not meant for children," he said, his voice low, fierce, each word weighed down with anger. "It was forged in the old days, when the pack feared corruption. A trial by fire, by blood, by shadow. They believe it burns away weakness. Or reveals monsters." Marisa's stomach clenched, bile rising. "And they would put my newborn, through that?" "They would," he growled. "Because they are cowards who cannot imagine a world beyond their laws." Her arms tightened around her daughter. "What happens if she doesn't?" "She will," he cut in sharply, his eyes blazing, his voice thundering with conviction. "She will survive. I won't allow any other outcome." But Marisa saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. She saw what he wasn't saying. Her chest constricted until she could hardly breathe. "Tell me," she demanded, her voice trembling but firm. "What do they do to her?" Lucien's jaw clenched so tightly the veins in his neck stood out. He dragged in a breath like a man preparing to wound himself with his own words. "Fire," he whispered. "They burn her skin with silver flame. If she heals, they call her pure. If not," his voice cracked, then hardened again. "Then they end her." Marisa's cry tore from her throat before she could stop it. Her daughter stirred, whimpering softly, sensing her mother's fear. Marisa pressed her lips against the child's hair, rocking her, whispering, "No, no, no." Tears blurred her vision, but through them, Lucien's face swam into focus, etched with rage, but also something raw, something broken. "I've seen it," he said, his voice low. "Pups who never had a chance. Children who weren't even given names before the flames took them. It is cruelty dressed as tradition. And it ends with her." Marisa's tears spilled hot and heavy, her voice trembling. "And if they try to force it?" Lucien's fangs glinted, his eyes burning brighter than fire. "Then I will tear the pack apart, bone by bone, until there is nothing left of their laws." The vow vibrated through the room, through her chest, through the bond that tethered them. It was both promise and threat. And for the first time, Marisa realized Lucien wasn't just protecting them from the pack. He was preparing for war. The baby finally drifted back to sleep, her small body warm against Marisa's chest. She laid the child in a makeshift cradle near the fire, a wicker basket lined with blankets, her hands lingering as though she could shield her daughter from the world simply by not letting go. When she finally straightened, Lucien was waiting. He had cleared the table, weapons spread across it like a grim offering, knives of silver, short swords etched with runes, even a crossbow polished to a dark sheen. Marisa's stomach tightened. "You expect me to use those?" Lucien's gaze locked with hers, unyielding. "I expect you to survive." "I just gave birth," she snapped, raw and exhausted. "My body can barely stand, Lucien. How am I supposed to fight?" "You're already fighting," he interrupted, his voice sharp but steady. "Every moment you hold her. Every time you breathe instead of breaking. You fight. This is no different." Her breath caught, anger and fear tangling in her chest. "You don't understand." "I do," he growled softly, stepping closer. His eyes glowed, fierce yet steady. "I was thrown into blood before I learned to walk. Trained with fire on my skin, steel at my throat. I survived because I had no choice. But you," his voice dropped reverent. "You have a choice. And if you choose her, you will find strength you never knew." Marisa's throat tightened. She looked back at her daughter, tiny and peaceful, her amber crimson eyes flickering faintly even in sleep. Then back at Lucien, whose gaze burned like a forge. Reluctantly, she stepped to the table. Her hand hovered over the weapons, trembling. The silver dagger gleamed, its hilt carved with symbols she didn't recognize. When her fingers finally curled around it, the metal was cold, heavier than she expected. Lucien's lips curved faintly, not in amusement but in approval. "Good. Now hold it like this." He stepped behind her, his hand covering hers, guiding the angle of the blade. His body radiated heat, his presence overwhelming. She swallowed hard, focusing on his voice. "Wait forward," he instructed. "Blade steady. Don't think about how to fight. Think about why." Her chest ached. "Because of her," she whispered. His voice rumbled in her ear, low and fierce. "Exactly. Every swing, every strike, you don't do it for yourself. You do it for her." Marisa exhaled shakily, gripping the dagger tighter. She swung once, awkward, the blade slicing air. Lucien adjusted her stance, his hands steadying her. Again. Again. Until her arms burned and sweat beaded at her temple. By the time she lowered the blade, trembling, Lucien turned her gently toward him. His gaze softened, though the fire never left his eyes. "You see? You're stronger already." She wanted to deny it. Wanted to collapse. But somewhere in her chest, beneath the exhaustion, a flicker of strength stirred. For the first time, she believed him. Marisa set the dagger down with trembling hands, her body aching from even the small effort. She leaned against the table, sweat dampening her brow, and let out a bitter laugh. "Survival. That's all you keep saying. Endure. Fight. Survive." Lucien's gaze narrowed. "It's the first law of life." She shook her head fiercely, her voice sharp despite the exhaustion weighing on her limbs. "But it isn't enough, Lucien. What kind of life is that? Running, fighting, hiding, always waiting for someone to come after us?" Her voice cracked, her eyes burning. She deserves more than just surviving. The firelight flickered across his face, casting sharp shadows across his sharp features. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he stepped closer, his presence filling the space until she had to lift her chin to meet his gaze. "She will have more," he said, his voice low but certain. "But first, she needs you alive to give it to her." Marisa blinked, her chest tightening. "Me?" Lucien's eyes softened, though their crimson gold glow burned steady. "Do you not see? They don't just want her." He lifted a hand, brushing his knuckles along her cheek with unexpected gentleness. "They want you." Her breath hitched. "Me? Why?" "Because you anchor her," he murmured. "You anchor me. The bond is not just between us, it runs through her, through all three of us. Without you, she is vulnerable. Without you, I am weakened. You are the heart that binds this family." The word family hit her harder than any blade. She froze, blinking back sudden tears. Lucien's hand slid to the back of her neck, steady and firm. "That is why the pack will test you as much as her. That is why the covens will whisper your name as much as hers. And that is why the veil will try to drag you both into shadow." Marisa's pulse raced, fear and something hotter tangling in her chest. "So I'm a target too." "You always were," he said softly, his fangs glinting faintly as he spoke. "The moment fate tied us together. But it also made you more than prey. It made you mine." The word vibrated through her, undeniable, terrifying. She wanted to recoil, to deny him, but the bond thrummed in her veins like blood itself. She couldn't breathe past the heat of it. "Lucien," she whispered, torn between fear and the dangerous pull of belonging. His thumb brushed against her jaw, his voice dropping lower, darker. "You don't have to accept it tonight. Or tomorrow. But know this, Marisa. Your strength is not just for her. It is for me. And mine will always, always be for you." The fire popped sharply in the hearth, startling her enough to draw a shaky breath. She turned her gaze down to the dagger she'd left on the table, then back to the child sleeping soundly in her cradle. And she realized that no matter how much she wanted to deny it, he was right. She was no longer just fighting for her daughter. She was fighting for all three of them. Evening crept in slowly, the light fading into dusky blues that pooled against the cabin walls. The rain had stopped, but the forest outside was unnervingly still. No birds called. No wind stirred the trees. Marisa sat near the cradle, rocking gently as her daughter slept. Her arms ached from holding a blade earlier, her body still recovering from the birth, but her mind wouldn't let her rest. Every creak of the cabin made her tense. Every shadow felt like a threat waiting to take form. Lucien moved with restless precision, checking the shutters, adjusting the wards, laying a crossbow within reach. His motions were too sharp, too deliberate. He sensed it too. "They're out there," Marisa whispered. He didn't look at her. "Yes. How many?" His nostrils flared, his eyes flashing faintly in the dim light. "More than last night." Her throat tightened. "Then why don't they come in? Why circle like wolves at the edge of firelight?" Lucien turned then, his gaze fierce. "Because they're testing me. Testing us. They want me to show weakness. To see if fear will drive you into their hands." Marissa's chest ached, torn between terror and anger. "They're playing games with my daughter's life." Lucien's jaw tightened. "Yes. And that is why you need to be ready." He moved toward her, crouching so his face was level with hers. His hand closed around hers, firm and warm. "If they breach these walls, if they drag me outside, you must not freeze. Do you understand? You take her. You run. You fight if you have to." Her heart hammered. "I can't, I'm not like you." His eyes burned brighter, crimson-rimmed with gold. "No, you're stronger. Because you fight with love, not hunger. That is a weapon they will never understand." Marisa blinked back tears, her chest tightening around the bond that pulsed between them. She wanted to deny it, to beg him not to put such weight on her shoulders. But then the baby stirred, her tiny eyes flickering open, glowing faint amber in the dim cabin light. And Marisa realized she didn't have the luxury of doubt. A howl shattered the silence outside. Low, long, carried by many voices. Others answered, weaving into a chorus that rattled the glass panes. The pack had drawn its circle. Lucien rose to his full height, his body thrumming with power, his fangs glinting as he bared them. "They're ready to test me." His voice dropped into a growl. "Then let them." Marisa clutched her daughter close, her pulse racing. The night had come alive with wolves, and she knew it was only a matter of time before the firelight was no longer enough to keep them out. The howls swelled, weaving through the trees like a storm of voices. Marissa's skin prickled, her every instinct screaming to hold her daughter tighter. She crouched beside the cradle, one hand gripping the silver dagger Lucien had given her. Its weight was foreign, but it was all that stood between her child and the monsters beyond the walls. Lucien stood at the door, his frame filling the cabin with alpha presence. His eyes burned crimson gold, his chest rising and falling with controlled fury. He didn't pace now. He didn't move at all. He simply waited. The first strike came like thunder. The cabin shook as claws raked against the wood. Another slam followed, the growl of a wolf vibrating through the walls. The wards hissed faintly, the ash and bone dust sparking as if alive. "They're testing the barriers," Lucien growled. "Looking for weakness." Marissa's heart raced. "Will it hold?" "Yes," he said, but his voice carried the weight of a man who knew nothing was certain. A shadow passed the window. Another slammed against the shutters. The baby stirred, whimpering at the vibrations, and Marisa bent quickly, whispering soothing words though her own fear tasted like iron. Then, suddenly, silence. Marissa's breath caught. Where did they? The crash came from above. The roof groaned as weight landed hard on the beams. Claws scraped, dragging across the timber, circling like sharks above water. Lucien bared his teeth, his voice thunderous. "Stay with her." He leapt for the ladder that led to the loft, his body a blur of strength and speed. But even before he reached it, wood splintered. A shadow dropped through the roof. Marisa screamed, clutching the baby to her chest as the first wolf hit the floor. It shifted mid-motion, half man, half beast, its eyes glowing savage amber, its claws dripping silver from the wards it had torn through. Lucien struck before it reached her, his body colliding with the creature in a blur of snarls and fangs. The impact rattled the floor, both monsters tearing at each other in a storm of claws and teeth. And then glass shattered. A second wolf crashed through the window, its body twisting as it landed. It rose on two legs, towering, its eyes locked on Marisa. Her blood ran cold. Instinct screamed at her to run, but the cradle was at her back, her daughter's cries rising in terror. With trembling hands, she gripped the dagger and raised it between them. The wolf snarled, saliva dripping from its fangs, and lunged. Marisa screamed, swinging the blade with all her strength. The silver caught its arm, searing flesh with a hiss. The beast recoiled, howling in pain, its claws raking across the table instead of her chest. Her breath came in sobs, her arms shaking, but she didn't let go of the dagger. She put herself between the wolf and her daughter, every part of her body screaming with terror, but refusing to move aside. "Come on," she shouted, her voice breaking. "You'll go through me first." The wolf snarled, crouching to spring again. And then Lucien's voice thundered across the cabin, primal and terrible. "She is mine." His body blurred as he slammed the first wolf into the wall, his fangs buried in its throat, blood spraying across the floorboards. His eyes blazed as he turned on the second, his growl shaking the very air. The wolf hesitated, its amber eyes flickering with doubt. For the first time, Marisa saw fear ripple through the predator. The second wolf froze mid-lunge, its glowing eyes flickering as Lucien turned on it. The room seemed smaller with him like that, eyes burning crimson and gold, fangs gleaming, every line of his body radiating lethal power. Lucien's snarl shook the cabin walls. It wasn't the sound of a wolf. It wasn't the hiss of a vampire. It was both, layered, impossible, an ancient sound that made even Marisa's knees weaken though it wasn't aimed at her. The wolf hesitated only a heartbeat too long. Lucien blurred forward. One clawed hand seized its throat, lifting it effortlessly off the ground. The creature kicked and snarled, but its strength was nothing against his. Lucien's other hand drove into its chest, claws piercing deep. The wolf howled in agony, its voice cut short as Lucien flung its body into the wall with bone-shattering force. Marisa flinched, clutching her daughter tighter, her breath ragged. She had seen him fight before, but not like this. Not with the full force of both halves unleashed. The hybrid. The nightmare the pack whispered about. The alpha that even monsters feared. The wolf on the floor coughed, struggling to rise, but Lucien was already upon it. His fangs sank into its shoulder, tearing through muscle. With a roar, he hurled the broken creature out through the shattered window into the night. The forest fell silent. No more claws on the roof. No more growls at the windows. The circle of wolves outside had broken, their courage shattered. Lucien stood in the wreckage, his chest heaving, blood slick across his mouth and claws. His eyes glowed brighter than the fire, feral and unyielding. He was beautiful and terrifying, salvation and damnation in the same breath. Then, from the tree-line, a voice carried. The elder. Alpha. The word rang not in challenge, but in recognition. Yet the tone was sharp, laced with warning. Lucien stepped forward to the open door, blood still dripping from his claws. His voice was thunder. She is under my protection. Any who breach this roof again will not live to see the right. A long silence followed. Then the elder's voice came again, cold and steady. Then let the moon judge her. You cannot stop it, Lucien. When the blood moon rises, we will know if she is salvation or destruction. The forest shifted. Footsteps retreated. The pack melted back into the night. Lucien stood in the doorway a moment longer, his body still vibrating with the beast inside him. Slowly, deliberately, he turned back to Marisa. She clutched their daughter close, her chest heaving, her hand still gripping the silver dagger though her arm trembled from the effort. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "You're not just one of them. Or the other. You're something else entirely." Lucien's eyes dimmed slightly, the fire receding but never fading. "Yes, and so is she." Marisa swallowed hard, her fear and awe colliding in her chest. She looked at her newborn, then back at him. And for the first time, she truly understood why the world would never let them rest. The cabin smelled of blood and smoke, the tang of iron mingling with the faintly acrid scent of silver. Splintered wood littered the floor where the wolves had broken through, the wards along the window frames smoldering weakly. Lucien stood in the doorway still, his chest rising and falling with sharp restraint. The glow in his eyes had dimmed, but not gone. His claws were still half-formed, glistening red. Marisa's arms trembled as she rocked her daughter, whispering soothing words that were as much for herself as the child. When the baby's cries quieted to small hiccups, She dared lift her eyes to him. "You're hurt," she said softly. Lucien glanced down, as though only just realizing blood seeped from a deep gash across his ribs. The silver's burn lingered along his skin, refusing to close. He exhaled slowly, and for a moment his shoulders sagged, the alpha mask slipping. "It will mend." Marisa shifted her daughter into the cradle and rose unsteadily. Her legs still ached from childbirth, her body fragile, but she crossed to the table where cloth and water sat. Without waiting for permission, she returned and pressed the damp fabric against his wound. He hissed softly, though not in pain. His gaze locked on her, molten and unblinking. "You shouldn't touch me like this," he murmured. "Not when the beast still lingers in my blood." She ignored him, pressing the cloth firmer. "If I can hold my daughter after giving birth, I can handle patching you up." A faint smile touched his lips, humorless but warmed by something else. "Stubborn." Her chest tightened. "You terrified me tonight." His jaw flexed, guilt shadowing his expression. "I know. But..." She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "I've never felt safer either." The words hung between them, raw and heavy. Lucien's hand lifted, hovering near her cheek, but not quite touching. His eyes softened, the crimson gold glow dimming into something almost human. "That is dangerous, Marisa. To trust me." She met his gaze, her heart thundering. "Maybe, but I do." The bond between them thrummed like a living thing, tugging, demanding. For a moment, she thought he might close the distance, that he might kiss her, claim her as fully as the word mate suggested. But then the baby stirred, letting out a soft whimper. The spell broke. Marisa turned quickly, scooping her daughter up. She pressed her lips to the child's warm forehead, whispering, "I'll keep you safe." Behind her, Lucien's voice came low, a vow wrapped in shadow. "We will." The fire had burned low again, casting the cabin in amber shadows. The storm was gone, replaced by the restless quiet of a forest that had seen blood. Marisa sat on the couch, her daughter tucked against her chest, swaddled and finally sleeping peacefully. Her own body was weary to the bone, but her mind churned with too many questions to rest. Lucien sat across from her at the table, his shirt discarded, the faint glow of silver-burn scars still visible along his ribs where she had tended him. In the flicker of the firelight, his body seemed both impossibly strong and strangely vulnerable. She found her voice in a whisper. "Why do they fear you so much?" Lucien's eyes lifted from the blade he had been idly cleaning. They glowed faintly, but softer now, less predator and more man. "Because I am both. And neither." Marisa frowned. "That's not an answer." He leaned back in the chair, exhaling slowly. "Wolves see loyalty in the bond, in the pack. Vampires see power in blood, in hunger. But me..." His lips twisted. "I belong to neither world fully. To wolves, I'm too tainted. To vampires, too wild. I am the reminder that their absolutes are fragile. That what they call impossible can live." Her chest ached at the bitterness in his tone. "And that terrifies them." His gaze locked with hers, molten and unyielding. "It terrifies me." She blinked, startled. "You." Lucien rose, crossing the room with slow, deliberate steps. He stopped before her, his presence overwhelming, yet not threatening. His hand brushed the cradle where their daughter now slept, his touch softer than she thought possible. "I was raised in shadows and fire," he murmured, his voice rough. "I was told from the start I was an error. A curse. And part of me still believes it. But when I see her..." His jaw tightened, his eyes flicking to Marisa's. "When I see you, I wonder if perhaps I was made for this. To protect. To endure. To prove them wrong." Marisa's throat tightened with unshed tears. "You're not a curse." He tilted his head, studying her as though weighing whether she truly believed that. "You say that now. But you haven't seen me fully unleashed." Her mind flashed to the cabin moments earlier, the blood, the snarls, the wolves broken beneath his claws. Terrifying. Monstrous. And yet, he had stood between her and danger. Between her daughter and death. She met his gaze firmly. "I saw enough tonight to know one thing." His brows lifted slightly. "And what is that?" Her voice trembled but held. That you'll never be the monster I have to fear. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, Lucien knelt before her. His hand brushed her cheek, his touch careful, reverent, as though she were something fragile and sacred. The glow in his eyes dimmed further, leaving only warmth. Then you are braver than I ever was. The bond thrummed between them, steady and undeniable. And for the first time, Marisa didn't recoil from it. The first pale streaks of dawn slipped through the cracks in the shutters, painting thin lines of silver across the cabin floor. Marisa rocked gently with her daughter in her arms, the baby's soft breathing a fragile melody in the tense quiet. Lucien stood by the window, his broad frame outlined against the dim glow outside. He had been still for too long, his silence heavier than the night itself. Finally, Marisa broke it. You're listening. His head turned slightly, his eyes burning faintly crimson in the half-light. Always. Her throat tightened. Are they still out there? Some, he admitted. Watching. Waiting. Wolves do not retreat fully, not when they smell blood. But it isn't the pack that worries me. Marisa's arms tightened protectively around her daughter. Then what? Lucien turned from the window, his expression carved from stone. Betrayal. The words sank into her chest like ice. From who? He moved closer, crouching in front of her so his gaze met hers directly. The elder is bound by law. He will not strike until the right. But the young ones, his eyes narrowed, glinting with gold. They burn for blood. For challenge. For my place. They don't want to wait. They'll try to break me by breaking you. Marisa's breath hitched, her body curling instinctively over the baby. You mean, they'll come for me? Lucien's hand rested on her knee, steady and grounding. Yes. Which is why you must be ready. They'll come not as wolves in the open, but as shadows in the night. They'll slip through cracks, whisper poison, seek to separate us. If they can sever the bond. Sever. Her voice cracked. They can do that? His jaw tightened. Only through death. Yours. Or mine. The room tilted around her. She swallowed hard, her heart hammering against her ribs. So no matter what, they won't stop until one of us is gone. Lucien's eyes softened, though his voice remained fierce. Then we don't give them the chance. We stay together. We fight together. And when they come, we make them regret the day they dared touch what's mine. Marisa met his gaze, tears pricking her eyes. Despite the fear clawing at her chest, the bond between them hummed steady, grounding her. She wasn't just terrified anymore. She was angry. Angry at a world that would call her daughter cursed. Angry at wolves who spoke of her life like law to be measured. Angry at fate itself for tying her to a storm she had never asked for. She tightened her grip on the silver dagger lying on the table beside her. Then let them try. Lucien's lips curved not a smile, but something sharper. Pride. Recognition. You're ready, he said softly. Marisa didn't feel ready. Her body still ached from birth, her heart still throbbed with fear. But for her daughter, for the bond she would be. Outside, a lone howl cut the dawn. Not a challenge. A promise. The circle hadn't broken. It was only waiting. The howl faded into the morning mist, leaving the cabin cloaked in uneasy silence. Marisa shifted her daughter higher against her chest, brushing a finger across the baby's downy hair. The child slept on, blissfully unaware of the blood and war waiting outside her cradle. Her voice cracked as she broke the quiet. What happens if they come for you? Not as shadows. Not for me. For you. Lucien sat at the table, his arms braced on his knees, his head bowed slightly. He looked less like the alpha then and more like a man carrying stones too heavy for any mortal to bear. They will, he said simply. One of the young ones will grow bold. They'll issue a challenge for dominance. For the right to lead. Marisa's stomach turned. And if you lose? His eyes lifted to hers, glowing faintly crimson in the dim firelight. Then I die. And everything I've claimed. His gaze flicked to her, then the baby. Dies with me. Her breath caught. So you'd have to kill them. Lucien leaned back, exhaling slowly, the sound heavy. I already have. Challenges don't end in mercy. Wolves understand strength. not compassion. They will not hesitate to spill my blood. I cannot hesitate to spill theirs. The words cut through her like knives. But they're your pack. His jaw tightened, his gaze hardening. They're wolves. They will either stand with me or fall beneath me. Marisa shook her head, disbelief and horror clashing in her chest. How can you talk about it like that? As if they're nothing. Lucien's voice softened, but it lost none of its weight. Because if I falter, if I let my heart soften when they bare their teeth, they will rip your throat open before my body even hits the ground. Her arms tightened around her daughter until the baby stirred. Tears stung her eyes. So either way, we're living on borrowed time. Lucien rose, crossing the room in 2 strides. He crouched before her, his hand brushing hers where it gripped the dagger. His touch was steady, grounding. No, we are living on borrowed fear. Fear is what they want, Marisa. Fear is what breaks bonds. But if we stand together, there is no pack strong enough to sever us. Her lips trembled. And if you're wrong? His eyes blazed, crimson and gold shimmering with feral certainty. Then the mountains will be painted in their blood before I let them touch you. The fire cracked sharply in the hearth, as though punctuating his vow. Marisa searched his face, her heart thundering, and for a moment she saw not just the alpha, not just the hybrid, but the man. A man who had been forced to carry power like a curse, who had been hated for surviving. And a man who would kill the world if it meant protecting the 2 souls fate had finally given him. Lucien's pacing returned, slow and deliberate, his body coiled like a predator waiting for the strike he knew was coming. The firelight flickered across his face, sharpening the planes of his jaw, the dangerous glint of fang when his lips pulled thin. Marisa watched him, her daughter resting against her chest, small and impossibly fragile in her arms. Every breath she took felt heavy with questions, but one forced its way past her lips. Which one? Lucien's head lifted, his eyes narrowing faintly. Which one what? Her throat tightened. Which of them will come first? You said the young ones burn for blood. Which one do you know is going to challenge you? He hesitated. For a moment, silence filled the cabin, punctuated only by the crackle of the fire. Then his jaw clenched and his voice dropped low. Kale. The name hit the air like a stone dropped in water. Marisa frowned. Kale. Lucien's eyes burned brighter, crimson edged with amber. The gray-haired elder's protege. Young. Strong. Too ambitious for his own good. He thinks himself already alpha. Thinks me unworthy because my blood isn't pure. His lip curled in a humorless smile. He whispers to the others. Stirs their hunger. He will come. Marisa swallowed hard. And if he wins? He won't, Lucien cut in, his voice sharp, final. Her voice rose despite herself. But if he does? What happens to us? His gaze locked on hers, fierce, unyielding. Then you run. As far and as fast as you can. Marisa shook her head violently, tears stinging her eyes. No, I'm not leaving you. Marisa, his voice softened, the alpha's edge dimming just slightly. He stepped closer, crouching before her, his hand brushing her cheek. You don't understand. Kale doesn't just want me dead. He wants you. If he takes you, he severs the bond. He strengthens his claim. And the child, his voice cracked, then hardened again. The child will not survive him. Her body curled instinctively around her daughter, terror slicing through her. Then I'll fight him too. A flash of something surprise, then pride, lit his eyes. You would die. Her grip on the dagger tightened. Then I'll die fighting. Because I'm not running and leaving you behind. The bond thrummed between them, sharp and alive, echoing her words like a vow. Lucien's hand lingered on her cheek, his gaze molten. You're more wolf than human, he murmured. Her lips trembled. No, I'm just a mother. For a long moment, they stayed there, the weight of fate pressing on them like the mountains themselves. Then Lucien rose, his presence filling the cabin once more. Then we prepare, he said. His voice carried the certainty of thunder. For Kale. For the right. For all of it. Marisa held her daughter tighter, her heart pounding. She didn't know if preparation would ever be enough. But for the first time, She felt the beginnings of something else in her chest, something stronger than fear. Resolve. The fire burned low, embers glowing like stars against the ash. Outside, the forest had gone quiet again, the wolves' howls fading into the distance, but Marisa knew it was not peace, only a pause. Lucien stood in the center of the room, his body taut with power, his eyes smoldering crimson gold. He had trained until sweat streaked down his chest, every motion sharp, violent, purposeful. The table bore the scars of his blades. The air still vibrated from the force of his growls. Marisa sat near the cradle, her daughter pressed against her chest. The baby stirred faintly, tiny fists curling as though even in sleep she sensed the storm waiting beyond the walls. Marisa kissed her hair, whispering promises too fragile to stand against fate, but promises all the same. Lucien finally stilled. He turned toward them, his presence heavy, his voice low but sure. Kale will come. The pack will circle. The right will rise. And the wraiths, they will not stop hunting. Marisa's throat tightened. So, what do we do? His gaze softened when it landed on her, the alpha's fire tempered by something older, something deeper. We endure. We defy. We do what no one believes we can. He stepped closer, crouching before her, his hand brushing gently across her cheek. We raise her. Together. Her lips trembled. Even if it kills us? His fangs flashed faintly in the firelight, but his voice was a vow carved in stone. Especially then. Because if we fall as hers. Not as theirs. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't look away. For the first time since she had stumbled onto this mountain road, she didn't feel like prey caught in a storm. She felt like part of something larger, heavier, unbreakable. She shifted, placing the baby in his arms. Lucien's breath caught as he held the child, her tiny eyes flickering open, glowing faintly amber and crimson. She looked up at him as though she already knew what he was, what she was. His expression changed. The alpha. The beast. The hybrid. All fell away, leaving only the man. A father. She is ours, he whispered, all lacing every syllable. Marisa leaned into his side, exhaustion pulling at her but heart steady at last. Then let the world come. Lucien's eyes lifted, burning brighter than the dying fire. Yes, he murmured, a promise and a threat. Let them come. The bond thrummed between them, stronger than fate, stronger than fear. And as dawn broke over the mountains, painting the forest in pale gold, the three of them stood together, no longer prey, no longer cursed. But a family. A family the world would never forget.